Donald Trump's obviously lethargic claim that he wants to end the war in Ukraine continues to rest less on clarity than on performance. And the events surrounding President Vladimir Zelensky's visit to Florida, now compounded by Russia's latest escalation rhetoric, make that performance increasingly stark. On the day Zelensky arrived for a high-stakes bilateral meeting, Trump publicly announced that he'd spoken with Vladimir Putin. The sequencing mattered. Before meeting the leader of a nation under invasion, Trump chose to spotlight his private conversation with the man who launched that invasion, reinforcing a familiar dynamic in which Trump casts himself as the indispensable intermediary, the lone figure who can manage both sides. Since the leaking of a US peace plan, which originated as a set of Russian demands, literally translated from Russian in mid-November, several supposed deadlines for peace have come and gone. We're now over 360 days beyond the 24 hours that Trump promised his voters he would end the war in. And now, Russia has moved almost immediately to weaponize the optics of Trump's faux diplomacy. Shortly after the Trump-Zelensky meeting, the Kremlin claimed it had foiled a Ukrainian drone attack on Putin's alleged residence in the Novgorod region. Russian officials escalated the claim dramatically, with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warning that Moscow's negotiating position would be reviewed and that retaliatory strikes against Ukraine had already been selected. Zelensky responded bluntly, calling the allegation typical Russian lies and accusing Moscow of deliberately sabotaging peace talks while preparing new attacks on Kiev, including possible strikes on major government buildings. Zelensky's warning was not abstract. He pointed to Russia's past bombing of government facilities in central Kiev as precedent, and argued that the sudden resident strike story was designed to manufacture justification for further Russian escalation. According to Zelensky and Ukraine's foreign minister, Moscow was deploying a familiar tactic: accuse the other side of exactly what Russia is doing or planning to do itself. Ukraine, they emphasized, targets only legitimate military objectives and is acting in self-defense against ongoing aggression. What makes this episode especially troubling is how neatly it fits into the political theater that Trump has constructed around himself. Russia's presidential advisor, Yuri Yusikov, claimed that Putin personally briefed Trump about the alleged attack during their call, and that Trump was shocked by the news. Trump's press secretary described the conversation as positive, a characterization that again centered on Trump's reaction, rather than interrogating the credibility or purpose of the Russian claims. In effect, Moscow injected itself directly into Trump's narrative of peacemaking, using him as both audience and amplifier for an information operation that appeared aimed not only at the Russian public, but also at an impressionable White House. What's worse is that Trump seemed inclined to side with Putin over Zelensky, taking a murderous dictator's word for it, once again over his own US intelligence services. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's treatment during his Florida visit took on added symbolic weight. His arrival without a visible US official greeting at the airport, a departure from customary diplomatic protocol, contrasted sharply with the attention Trump has historically lavished on authoritarian leaders, including Putin himself. Whether intentional or not, likely intentional, the message conveyed was one of hierarchy. Russia is courted, Ukraine is managed. The insistence that the meeting take place at Mar-a-Lago, rather than a formal government setting, further personalized the encounter, reinforcing Trump's tendency to frame international crises as transactional deals conducted on his property under his authority. Substantively, the talks themselves revealed both progress and fragility. Zelensky said that the United States had offered strong security guarantees lasting 15 years as part of a 20-point peace plan discussed with Trump, and that both the US and Congress and Ukraine's parliament would vote on these pledges. Yet, he also acknowledged that key issues remained unresolved, particularly the future of Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. Zelensky was candid about the limits of past assurances, noting that earlier guarantees, including those in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum backed by the US and the UK, did not work for Kiev. Security guarantees are not abstract language, but the core lesson of 3 decades of broken promises. Trump has offered little detail, though, about how such guarantees would be enforced. He has ruled out deploying peacekeeping troops and has spoken dismissively about some of the mechanisms Ukraine considers essential. Zelensky suggested that international monitors in a post-war Ukraine could provide reassurance and deterrence. And he pressed Trump to think bigger and longer term. He told reporters that he'd asked Trump to consider guarantees lasting 30, 40, or even 50 years, an historic commitment that would fundamentally reshape Europe's security architecture. Trump, Zelensky said, replied that he would think about it. This uncertainty is precisely what Russia appears eager to exploit. By floating dramatic accusations threatening retaliation and tying its negotiating posture to alleged Ukrainian provocations, the Kremlin signals that it retains escalation dominance while peace talks are ongoing. When those threats are folded into Trump's highly personalized style of diplomacy, with Russian officials portraying Trump as shocked, engaged, and receptive. The danger is that the US president becomes part of the leverage Moscow uses against Kiev. The conversation shifts from how Russia will end its invasion to how Ukraine must respond to Russian outrage. Critics argue that this dynamic reveals the hollowness of Trump's peace posture. By treating the war as a dispute between two sides who simply need to be brought together, he erases the fundamental asymmetry at its core. Ukraine is fighting for survival. Russia is attempting to redraw borders by force. When Trump elevates his rapport with Putin and downplays Ukraine's security demands, the pressure flows in just one direction. Kiev is asked to compromise, to reassure, to prove its reasonableness, while Moscow escalates rhetorically and militarily without being forced to demonstrate good faith. The cumulative effect is a peace process that risks becoming performative rather than protective. Trump benefits politically from appearing decisive and central, from staging calls and meetings that suggest momentum. Russia benefits strategically from injecting chaos, fear, and misinformation into that process. And Ukraine, meanwhile, is left warning of imminent attacks on its government buildings, while still having to negotiate for guarantees that history suggests may once again prove fragile. If Trump genuinely wants to end the war, symbolism will not be enough. Peace cannot be built on vague assurances, asymmetric pressure, and indulgence of Russian narratives timed to derail diplomacy. It requires confronting the reality of aggression, committing to enforceable security guarantees, and refusing to let Moscow set the terms of both war and peace through intimidation. Until then, Trump's performance may continue to play well on Fox News, but for Ukraine, the consequences of mistaking theater for strategy could be devastating.